Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to one and all on the behalf of Apollo Academy of Ophthalmology and Vidarbha Ophthalmic Society. Today's live webinar is being conducted by Apollo Academy of Ophthalmology under the aegis of Vidarbha Ophthalmic Society. Nowadays, we are going through a critical phase of lockdown due to pandemic of COVID-19. So we all ophthalmologists are going through a tough phase. We are facing so many problems, so many doubts, queries are there while rendering the services to OPD and OT patients. To overcome all these doubts and queries, we have got today big stalwarts of ophthalmology on national level like Dr. Namrata Sharma Madam from New Delhi, Dr. Partha Biswas sir from Kolkata, and Santosh Honar sir from Hyderabad. Of today's live webinar will get positive inputs to fight against COVID-19 who are really working as a corona warriors. Now I request Dr. Anuradha Rathod Madam to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Namrata Sharma Madam. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Team AO and Team BOS for giving me this opportunity to introduce a very good speaker, educator, and much loved and respected by all of us, Dr. Namrata Sharma. She has been in the forefront guiding all of us in this battle against COVID. She is Professor of Ophthalmology at RP New Delhi, a postgraduate from RP Center. She did her fellowship from Moorfields Eye Hospital, London. She is Regional Secretary of Asia Pacific Academy of Ophthalmology, Honorary General Secretary of AIOS. Her clinical work includes phaco emulsification and laser refractive surgeries. Key areas of interest are corneal transplantation, lamellar surgeries, DAG, DESEC, and DMEC. She is a recipient of many honors and awards. She has many publications, patents, books, but due to lack of this time today, we cannot elaborate all this. Thank you. I request Dr. Namrata ma'am to begin her lecture.
Thank you so much. It is indeed a pleasure and honor for me to be here, and I would like to thank Akola Academy of Ophthalmology and Vidarbha Ophthalmological Society for this. This happens to be also first webinar on the rebooting of ophthalmology, if I must say, because up till now we have been talking about lockdown and lockdown and lockdown. So now we have to reboot ophthalmology completely, reorient ourselves, revamp ourselves, rewire ourselves, and prepare ourselves for the next situation, which is going to be when the lockdown opens, because it is going to be a staggered lockdown. I do understand that in Maharashtra itself, there are a lot of green zones, red zones, and yellow zones. And as the situation will change, these zones will also change accordingly. And so we did come out with the AIOS guidelines, which was version 1, which was released. But these guidelines and these documents have to be dynamic, because every day it is going to be a different or changing scenario. So I would be talking to you about an important thing which interests us, and which actually is which actually we all are bothered because of the fact that we all are ophthalmologists, and this is one condition, conjunctivitis, which patients may present to us. What we are going to be talking about is what ophthalmologists should know about conjunctivitis in the COVID-19 pandemic. There are a lot of active cases in India, which is now much higher than this, and globally also there are a lot of confirmed cases. We may be a little behind in the COVID graph as compared to the other countries, but we never know. We may soon reach after a particular time there. Now, generally, symptoms of COVID-19 are there after 2 to 14 days of exposure, and you may have respiratory illness, fever, cough, shortness of breath, headache, diarrhea, anosmia, and conjunctivitis. And there could be complications like pneumonia, renal failure, etc. And then virus testing is done by the method of real-time PCR in the nasopharyngeal swabs as well as bloods, and we don't know whether it is still there in the tears or not. Notable is that this virus has S protein which have spikes, and these get attached to the receptors, especially the ACE receptors which are present, and these ACE receptors are present on the lung as well as the kidney. And unfortunately, these ACE receptors are also present on the conjunctiva, and that is why there is a conjecture that conjunctivitis may be attributed to this. ACE receptors are also present in other parts of the eye, which are shown here. Now, how does it reach conjunctiva? It may be because of direct inoculation site of the SARS-CoV from the infected drop, or from the migration of the upper respiratory throat infection through the nasolacrimal duct, or through the hematogenous infection of the lacrimal gland. So through any of these passages, it may reach conjunctiva. The key ocular presentation, of course, is conjunctival congestion. There could be chemosis, it's follicular conjunctivitis, and patients may even have conjunctival secretions and blurring of vision along with epiphora. There are anecdotal reports of it being present in the tears, and although things are not really very clear, these are several anecdotal reports which are shown, and you can see that here that there are just isolated cases where the COVID virus is present in the conjunctiva or in the tears. Now, this case report actually helps you to understand how conjunctivitis can occur in a patient of COVID, and in this patient, in this case, what they did was that they treated conjunctivitis with topical antibiotics and lubricants. You can see that there is follicular conjunctivitis, and classically it's a pink eye like this, which is shown here. And as Dr. Karandikar sir was saying, if you have vernal keratoconjunctivitis, you wouldn't see a picture like this. There'll be more of, more of papillae present and less of follicles present, unlike here where there are more of follicles which are present. It is more present in the inferior palpebral conjunctiva, unlike vernal catarrh, which is more present in the upper tarsal conjunctiva. And it may be associated with tender palpable pre-auricular lymphadenopathy as well. Now, if you see the RT-PCR levels in the tears, the temperature of the patient starts rising from here. The patient at day 1, 4, 5, 6 starts to have sore throat. The body temperature starts to rise from day 1. But notice that the red eyes start from day 13 to day 17. Tearing is again also for the same duration, and foreign body sensation is also for the same duration. So in this particular patient, conjunctivitis occurred much later. But having said this, there are cases where it is presented with only conjunctivitis and later on found out to be systemic involvement of COVID. And these are again very few case reports which are present. Now, if you look at again the concentration of the COVID in the tears, where the red eye was present, that means day 14, the concentration in the tears has increased. And likewise, day 17, it is there till day 17, and which corroborates very well with the time when the pink eye was present in that particular patient. And if you see the nasopharyngeal swab, RT-PCR, and if you look at the RT-PCR of the sputum, you see that it is there, it is positive for all the follow-up points. It doesn't decrease, unlike in the tears where it has started to decrease. So in this case report also highlighted the fact that probably conjunctivitis here is not a presenting feature, but it is a complication which has occurred after COVID infection has already set in. So as of now, we still don't know whether it could be primary presentation, it could be late presentation, or it could be complication. Again, there is no correlation studied between conjunctivitis and pneumonia. And we have no clear picture of the diverse ocular presentations of SARS-CoV, except that it will be follicular conjunctivitis, more in the inferior fornices associated with chemosis. Now, routine OPD visits and elective surgeries have been advised to be suspended by ophthalmic societies across the world. And as of now, except for few places which have actually come up with the elective surgeries, none are doing it. People are only doing emergency procedures, whether it is USA or it is Europe. Some of the places elective surgeries have started. They started in Singapore, and there was again a surge of patients, so they again stopped. Again, like I said, that possibility of it being a presenting symptom has only been reported in 2 cases out of so many thousands of COVID that have been, seen. So it can be there, but one need not be absolutely paranoid about it. And when a patient comes of conjunctivitis, like Sir said, you don't know whether it is, allergic conjunctivitis, or it is COVID conjunctivitis, or it is adenoviral conjunctivitis. So you need to do a very good examination to rule out that. So you have to balance, because you have to treat such patients which are non-COVID, and you have to also take a risk that there may be a possible transmission because of it being COVID-19. So how do you deal with such patients when the patients come with conjunctivitis or red eye? So when the patients have red eye and it is presumed to be conjunctivitis, now irrespective of what the diagnosis is, at the gate there should be a system to wash the hands, a security personnel or somebody should be there manning the gate, who's wearing masks, caps, preferably a face shield, or at least a mask should be there, who's sanitizing these patients. Then history of talk is important. Talk means history of travel, contact with the COVID patient for 1 month, fever, cough, or if the patient himself is a occupational health worker who's been in contact, or in cases where the patient has sensations lost of taste and of smell. So these are again two important signs which go towards COVID. Then there should be a mechanism to take temperature. Non-contact thermometers are available, although I'm told that they are now in short supply. And once all this is ruled out, then the patient enters and you take history and examination. If it is negative, you still treat it as a COVID suspect. But if history and examination shows that the patient could have COVID, then immediately you have to refer the patient to the COVID testing hospital and not take the patient in your clinic. And of course, you have to take special consent for examination when the patient comes, because you don't want any future litigations. Again, when if there is a case of conjunctivitis which you think could be a COVID, there should be a separate area where these designated team is there to treat the patients. And if you think that if it's a solo practice which doesn't have a designated area or cannot have a designated area, sometimes they are one room clinics, then in those cases from your entrance door only you should refer the patient outside. But if there is a possibility of having a triage area where you can see these patients on the slit lamp with the shield, with the face mask, then in those cases you can perhaps do it. Then it is important that the mask, goggles, gloves, etc. are there. The torchlight examination should be done by no touch technique. The slit lamp examination should be done with the shield. And I'm sure Santosh should be showing you how the OPD protocol has to be done. And then after every patient that you see, the slit lamp should be clean with the help of alcohol wipes, or even with the help of 1% sodium hypochlorite. And doors, handles, furniture again should be cleaned with 1% sodium hypochlorite after each patient and 4 times a day at least, and fumigate the room once a week. Then avoid contact with the extra staff, and then no entry to common area, including pharmacy. So if you think the patient has conjunctivitis, comes with a pink eye, then in a pre-prepared pouch itself, put the antibiotic drops and the lubricants and give to the patient, so the patient doesn't go hopping into the pharmacy or the optical shop and mingle with other people over there. And there should be at least some staff. I'm not saying you can't have teams if you are a solo practitioner, but at least somebody, maybe a non-ophthalmologist, who should be there as a backup reserve, just in case if there is history of contact with COVID by the ophthalmologist, then some other person is there to take care of the clinic while you are quarantining yourself. Then the follow-up of the patients, you can, rather than call the patient again, you can call the patient on phone itself and ask whether the eye is become white or not, whether their watering has decreased or chemosis have decreased. Encourage patients to send photographs on WhatsApp. And if the patient feels symptomatically better, then you continue the same treatment. And if he doesn't feel symptomatically better, then you have to ask for other symptoms like upper respiratory tract infection, worsening of the fever or sore throat, etc., and refer the patient accordingly. Again, topical steroids is something which you should not be advising on telemedicine, and avoid oral ibuprofen because that can complicate the systemic COVID picture, but one can give oral paracetamol if there is pain or if there is fever. Then social distancing is important in your own clinic for the healthcare worker, and appropriate history is very important to rule out allergic, seasonal, toxic conjunctivitis or vernal catarrh. And circumcorneal congestion should be looked at, because other conditions should also be ruled out, like uveitis, like iridocyclitis, and other cases where this circumcorneal congestion can be there. The slit lamp, of course, should be by the no-touch technique. Do not speak during the examination to avoid cross-infection, and cleaning of the instrument is important after examination. This transparent shield, I'm sure each one of you would have procured, is kept to maintain the distancing, and disinfect the slit lamp after each patient and twice a day with 1% sodium hypochlorite or with alcohol wipes. Now this, I think I've already talked about, that lubricants can be given and antibiotics can be given 4 times a day for 2 weeks, and this is 4 to 6 times a day for 2 weeks, and avoid topical steroids as far as possible. This has fallen into a little bit of disrepute. ICMR does say that if you are if you are in contact with a COVID patient or likely to come in contact, or a healthcare worker, then you can use hydroxychloroquine, and this can be enhanced with azithromycin. But it should be given with care, and just extrapolating that, maybe you can give chloroquine eye drops also in BT doses if the eye is red. But simply because there are no adverse events reported over a 1 month period, we don't know whether it really works or not topically for COVID patients. Now, in cases who have a prolonged QT interval or cardiac history, or those who who are diabetics, it is wise not to give oral hydroxychloroquine, because there it can cause hypoglycemia. Again, retinal toxicity is known to occur, but with very high doses, not in the doses that it is given. And today, I think there was a report from from US which said that in the randomized control trial where they gave hydroxychloroquine, the death rate was far less, 12%, as opposed to uh, where they did not give. Sorry, it is the other way around. Where they gave, it was 24%, and where they did not give, it was 12%. So again, this is become, oral hydroxychloroquine role has become a little dicey. So this I've already talked about, that it is important that you have rotation of your own staff, so that if quarantine is required, then that can be taken care of. And caregivers should also be monitored in your own clinic. Monitor whether your staff is following all the procedures for sanitization or not. And this is the COVID-19 pandemic emergency ophthalmic treatment consent form, which we did release because you don't want your staff or your clinic to get into trouble if the patient has COVID-19 infection. And in case he or his attendant does develop when he goes home, he should immediately tell you that, this thing has occurred, and this is the form for that. Now, we are doing a little bit of research on this. This is how the COVID looks like on transmission electron microscopy. And just to give you insight, we have 2 COVID areas in AIIMS. Main AIIMS is not a COVID area. AIIMS Jhajjar and AIIMS Trauma Center have been made COVID hospitals. And we've liaisoned with pulmonary medicine, virology, pathology, biochemistry, and ENT. And we are taking samples of COVID patients, because we have 200 plus COVID patients now, and we thought we can't get this. We can't get a better cohort than this. So we are taking their tear samples of proven COVID patients in these COVID hospitals and sending it for RT-PCR to see over a period of time at 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, and 4 weeks, and then correlating it with the nasopharyngeal and the buccal swabs to see, when these become positive. And also we are correlating it with the systemic symptoms, so that we know how pneumonia correlates with conjunctivitis, because this may be, useful in the future for the future research. So this is just to show the real-time PCR protocol that we are following. And then our biochemistry department is also looking at the cytokines and the cytology smears and immunocytochemistry. So this is all the research that is going on, and we are also correlating it with the clinical symptoms. So I'm sure something good is going to come out of it, so that we can at least advise the generations of the future how this COVID behaves, and especially in tears vis-a-vis with respect to the lungs or pneumonia. So, and in those cases where conjunctivitis is there, we are giving even 0.03% chloroquine phosphate eye drops, although I don't know whether it really helps or not. So this is our, these are our ophthalmic residents who are posted in the AIIMS Jhajjar and Trauma Center, and on COVID-19 duty, and even our own residents, 25% are posted there. I was talking to all of them, to the panelists earlier also, and 25% of them are quarantined, so we are left with only 50% strength. So thank you for your kind attention, and if there are any questions, I would be very happy to take them.
It is pleasure to be here and introducing a gentleman who needs no introduction. Dr. Santosh Honawar has done his graduation from Bangalore Medical College and post-graduation from RP Center, AIIMS, New Delhi. He has further trained in ocular oncology. He is an academic par excellence with numerous national and international awards to his name. He is currently editor of Indian Journal of Ophthalmology and made remarkable changes in the journal. Recently, he is the first Indian ophthalmologist to be conferred with American Academy of Ophthalmology highest award, Life Achievement Honor. He would be speaking today on a very, very important topic, that is conducting OPD during COVID-19 pandemic. Over to you, Dr. Santosh Honawar.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for a very nice initiative taken by you. I think this session is going to help us in the sense that we are on the verge of, as Namrata said, opening up. And at this time, we have to revise what are the guidelines that we had earlier issued.
Slightly loudly, please.
At the time of lockdown, whatever guidelines we had issued has to be revised, and new guidelines have to be issued for opening up. So what precautions do we take in the OPD now and beyond depends on obviously national guidelines, state guidelines, and the local guidelines. But this is the overall guidelines issued for the country by AIOS. So I'll be speaking from that perspective. This is the article that was published in Indian Journal of Ophthalmology May issue, which is online already, which shows these guidelines very clearly, and you can go through it. This is a very detailed 14-page article. So what I'm going to show are just parts of it, but customized for local practitioners and also condensed in a way that you can understand. Now, what were the guidelines during lockdown was that we have to reschedule all OPD patients by 4 weeks. This means that all routine OPD patients were to be rescheduled by 4 weeks. But at the same time, we were supposed to telephonically triage patients. That means that whenever a patient called, we were supposed to find out whether the patient has any elective issue, in which case we had to reschedule them. If the patient had an urgent issue, that means that he needs treatment within 24 to 72 hours. For example, a phacomorphic glaucoma, failing which there would be risk to loss of vision, eye or life. Those were classified as urgent cases. Emergencies are, for example, trauma, which needs immediate treatment, failing which there is risk to vision. So this kind of a triage was supposed to be done on telephone, and the patient was called to the OPD. And when the patient came to the OPD, again, there was supposed to be a triage. In the OPD, we had to extend the OPD time. Suppose your OPD times were initially, say, 8 to 4, you can extend it by a couple of hours so that you can manage to see fewer number of patients with longer time. Basically, you have to space out patients, and not more than 3 patients are supposed to be present in the clinic premises at one particular point in time. And also you have to reduce the number of staff so that if there is a COVID patient that you see inadvertently, then those staff will be quarantined, and the other 50% of the staff will not come to the hospital on that day, would be available for the hospital to function. But if it's a single ophthalmologist clinic, then that becomes very difficult. So we'll be very careful in not seeing COVID patients. The rules are currently changing. The current recommendation that has been submitted to ICMR, which is pending approval, is that if a particular doctor uses all the safety precautions, PPE, etc., right from the entry into the clinic to the exit of the patient, and the patient is also protected by a 3-ply mask, then the hospital will not be shut down and the hospital staff will not be quarantined. If that rule comes in, that will be very useful, because there will be lot many cases now until the population gets herd immunity. 60 to 70% of population will be infected, and over a period of time we're going to see increasing incidence. Now, when the patient comes to the hospital, there has to be a warning sign in local language. So this is what we have displayed in English, and we also have the same sign in local language, mentioning that if you are come for a routine follow-up or an elective surgery, then we are not going to see you and you have to come back after 4 or 6 weeks. We are only currently seeing new post-surgery and emergency patients and those on active treatment. So this is very clearly mentioned. So patient who has come for a routine follow-up can actually go back and they know that they're not going to be seen. And they are also advised that a face mask has to be used in the premises of the hospital and personal hygiene has to be maintained. No attendant is the policy, but if at all a patient insists, maximum one attendant would be allowed with the patient. This is how it looks at the entry. We have closed down the front part of the entry, and this is a side entry, which is a smaller, more controllable entry that we have opened. And you can see the distance. We have distance chairs which are maintained. So 1 meter distance is maintained between each patient who is waiting to get into the hospital. At the point of entry, patient's hand is sanitized with a hand sanitizer. And if the patient doesn't have a mask is provided to the patient by a security guard who is wearing a glove himself and a mask as well. In fact, ICMR advises that the person guarding the point of entry should have a cap and OT scrub as well, because he doesn't know whether a patient has COVID or not. Only beyond this point, this is the security guard, beyond this point would be the triage done. So this person is ideally to be protected with PPE. This is how the screening desk looks like. Screening desk would have an infrared thermometer, and the person at the screening would be protected by a cap and a mask. And as per ICMR guideline, OT scrub is important. And he also has spare mask and cap and hand sanitizer to give away to the patients. This will obviously increase the cost of your disposables, but you can build it into your consultation fee. But no patient should come into the hospital without a PPE and hand not being sanitized. All these are 3-ply masks as advised by ICMR, and these are alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Now this is the infrared thermometer that we are supposed to use to measure the temperature of the patient. And if the patient has a fever, then obviously that patient will not be let into the hospital and further questions are asked. So this is what we follow. At the point of entry, we screen for fever with an infrared thermometer. If the patient has fever and has an ocular emergency such as perforating injury or phacomorphic glaucoma, then the patient is diverted to a different entry where a designated ophthalmologist will see in a separate room. And this ophthalmologist will have entire PPE, including a face shield. If the patient does not have an emergency, then the patient is referred to a COVID center for medical care. Then you ask for, if the patient does not have fever, then you ask for TOCC history. That is travel, which now becomes redundant because most of the international flights are closed now. You also ask for occupation, contact, and clustering history. Does the patient know of anybody who has COVID? Does any of his neighbors have COVID infection? Has he gone and visited somebody who had COVID infection? These kind of histories that you take. Then you ask for history of symptoms. Upper respiratory tract infection like cough, breathlessness, etc. Then acute conjunctivitis within 2 weeks. Then if the patient has any of these symptoms positive, then he is a suspect. In that case, again, if the patient has an ocular emergency, then a designated ophthalmologist would see. If the patient does not have an ocular emergency, then you defer appointment by 2 weeks. If the patient has no fever and no suspicious symptoms, then he is seen by a regular ophthalmologist in a regular ophthalmology clinic with universal precautions. Now, this is screening by history. When the patient comes to you and if the patient is being triaged by a non-ophthalmologist who has no definite background in ophthalmology, then you simply ask for symptoms, history of injury to the eye, sudden loss of vision, acute pain, acute red eye, acute onset of masses in the eyelid or inflammatory eyelid conditions, acute onset double vision or sudden onset drooping of the eyelid, onset of colored halos, photophobia, floaters and flashes of light, discharge from the eye which is severe, and acute or subacute onset bulging of the eye. If these symptoms are positive, then the patient is considered for an urgent or emergency care. In the IGO, there is a list of patients who are to be seen as emergency, who are to be seen as urgent, and who are considered routine. This list is specialty specific, cataract, cornea, refractive, etc. For each specialty, we have listed the conditions which are supposed to be seen as emergency, urgent, or routine. I don't have time to go through this list, but you can definitely look up the IGO article, which gives a very specific list of these conditions. Now, once the patient is screened in, that means he is allowed to come into the hospital, he has to come to the registration desk. This can be made automated. You can use mobile phone apps or ask the patient to sit in the waiting room and fill a form instead of patient having to queue up at the designated registration desk. And in any case, not more than 3 patients are allowed at a time. This is a consent which is released by AOS. This is just in the form of words, but this form has already been sent across to you for downloading, and you can use that in your clinic. Essentially, you have to take a consent that the patient is aware that COVID pandemic is going on, and he has come to a hospital with his own volition for an emergency treatment. And patient also declares that he is asymptomatic, and in a situation where the patient comes into contact with any other fellow patient who has a disease which is asymptomatic, he may contract this infection. And the patient also gives a consent to take appropriate precautions to follow safety protocols prescribed by the doctor. You have to maintain, this is mandatory by law, a daily list of all healthcare workers, patients, and their attendants who are coming into the hospital with their verified mobile number and verified ID proof. You have to maintain a copy of their Aadhaar card or PAN card or whatever ID proof and a verified mobile number, so that if that patient comes to be positive, or if any of the patients who have visited the hospital on that day comes COVID positive, or if one of the staff is COVID positive, then you have to give this information to healthcare authorities. That's very important. The second thing we would recommend is that the patient and the attendant are mandated to download Arogya Setu, which is a tracking app. If somebody develops COVID and the tracking app is live on patient's mobile, you can easily come to know as to who all have been exposed. So this is important, and this is recommended by the Government of India. In the waiting room, you have to maintain physical distancing, which means that if there is a row of 3 chairs, one patient ideally sits on that row. And if you have a crowd, even then you should not make the middle seat occupied. You should leave a gap of 1 seat between 2 chairs. Ideally, even that should not happen. One patient should sit in a row of 3 chairs. Then in the examination room, the person who examines, such as ophthalmologist or the optometrist, has to use PPE. The recommended are, you have to use a glove, you have to use a cap, you have to use a 3-ply mask or a N95 mask, you have to use OT scrub, and white coat is optional. The patient wears a mask, patient doesn't wear a cap or anything of that sort, and there is a breath shield between the patient and the ophthalmologist. This is transparent, so it is not seen very clearly, but you can see now here, this is a breath sheet. This is a very nice transparent plastic sheet that has been cut to occupy the space between the objective of the slit lamp and the optical tube. So this simply sits in that position so that you are actually able to see through this. If you use an X-ray film, then what happens is that it is opaque partially, so you'll not be able to see the patient's face nicely, and you'll not be able to adjust the controls well. So if you have this transparent sheet, that becomes very easy. This is available for 3 to 4 rupees. You can maintain a stock of this, and after each patient, you can wash it, dry it, and replace it. If you have a stock, you can replace the dry one and then give away the one which is used for cleaning. So disinfection is very important. Minimal conversation. Patient should not talk much during the process of examination. Breath shield. Minimal contact examination. That means that you try to avoid applanation tonometry. try to touch the cul-de-sac of the patient, try to touch the tear of the patient, try to examine almost as much as possible without touching. Avoid syringing for sure and nasal endoscopy. This is very strongly recommended. No aerosol procedures such as non-contact tonometry, no contact lens trial. Avoid all non-essential investigations. Performing refraction and autorefractometry is okay. Opticals and pharmacy are okay as long as you maintain physical distance of 1 meter between two patients. And generally, paperless is advised, DMR or app-based documentation and digital payment. You don't try not to accept cash and try to use credit cards. These are all recommended. Now, this was the slit lamp red shield that I was talking about. Transparent, a thin 2 millimeter sheet of plastic where a small window has been cut to accommodate the optics of the slit lamp. And this provides a very good barrier. Even if the examiner doesn't wear a face shield, just the spectacles are enough. This is perfectly acceptable. When you do ophthalmoscopy, direct ophthalmoscopy is big no, and you can do indirect ophthalmoscopy at a safe distance. And if a patient is coughing, etc., then you can use a face shield, which is a simple face shield which is locally made, which is available, and you can also make it using hair bands, etc. But definitely direct ophthalmoscopy should not be performed. Once the patient leaves the room, you have to clean all the areas that have come into contact with 1% sodium hypochlorite. This is a simple household bleach which is diluted to 1%. 1% bacillocide extra is also acceptable, or more than 70% alcohol-based wipe. Discard the gloves, and after that, wash hand with soap and water. Dry the hand. Use a different set of glove and be ready for the next patient. Now, what are the Government of India ICMR recommended PPE? At the point of entry, since the security guard at the point of entry does not know whether the patient has COVID symptoms or not, it is ideal that he wears a surgical cap, surgical scrub suit, 3-ply surgical face mask, and disposable glove. In the waiting area, whoever is triaging the patient has low risk. Just a 3-ply surgical mask and disposable glove would do. For all the hospital sanitary or housekeeping staff, full PPE is recommended. Administrators who don't come into the contact, just a 3-ply surgical face mask would do. For ophthalmologists, what are required? As I already mentioned, if the patient is asymptomatic, COVID status is obviously no symptoms are there, there is no risk by history, then a slit lamp red shield, 3-ply mask, protective goggles, surgical cap, and surgical scrub suit are all that is required. If the patient has symptoms or signs or has been exposed, then you have to wear a full PPE, which is recommended. So this is what is recommended for an ophthalmologist. So this is how the routine OPD PPE set looks like. But if the patient has a symptom or a sign, then you have to be in a full-fledged HIV suit or a full body cover, as you saw here. Then the OPD areas, handles, door handles, etc., which are touched by the patient are periodically cleaned with bacillocide 1% or 1% sodium hypochlorite. At the end of the day, we fumigate. We all want to know when will all this end, but as has been said repeatedly, that is not the right question. Everyone, even WHO, has advised that this thing is not going to end soon. The question is, how do we continue? It may extend to 6 to 9 months or beyond a year. So in this situation, how do we continue at all? Am I? Sorry for the interruption. Were you able to see the last few slides?
Yes, sir, we were able to see.
Okay, fine. Okay. So when we open up the lockdown, what doesn't change is that whatever I said will not change. The point of entry screening will not change. Point of entry triage will not change. PPE for all the hospital personnel and the patient will not change. Waiting room etiquette will not change. Exam room precautions will not change. End of the day procedures will not change. What changes is that we start seeing routine patients. When we start seeing routine patients, obviously your volume will go high because patients have not been seen in the last 6 to 8 weeks and the volume will suddenly increase. To cater to that volume, you have to extend the working hours. You cannot compress your working hours and see more patients without giving distance between patients, without congesting your OPD, or to still see patients. So what we suggest is that if your OPD hours are from 8 to 2, you extend it to 8 to 6 and make your staff work in 2 shifts on alternate days and give at least 10 millimeter gap between each patient. Or you can practice teleophthalmology to reduce your patient volume. That is actually suggested since teleophthalmology is now legalized. You can actually see patients by using teleophthalmology. If you don't adapt to this, what will happen is that you will lose practice. Basically, if you are not prepared to kind of change over to a situation where you have to open up, you are going to lose your practice. All these are very nicely explained in several IGO articles in the May issue. So that's it. I had to say thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, AO and US. I have been given pleasant task of introducing Dr. Pratap Biswas, who in fact need no introduction. He is a cataract and refractive surgeon par excellence. He is a fellow of Shankar Nethralaya and he is a recipient of many awards. To name few, Colonel Rangachari Award, ECSR Amsterdam Award, APACRS Singapore Award, audition at US and Odisha. He is a reviewer to Journal of American Academy of Ophthalmology, editor AIOC, Reconner 2017. He has written many book chapters, Essential in Ophthalmology. His research in collaboration with IIT Kharagpur is going on from 2009 till date. He has has many publications in human molecular genetics, Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. He has conducted surgical workshop, 7 international and 59 national. He is a postgrad teacher, an evaluator, he is a guide, and he is a guest faculty in national and international conference. With these few remarks, I like to introduce Dr. Pratap Biswas. I request Dr. Pratap Biswas sir to please continue your talk.
Thank you very much for the very, very kind introduction. And I'm really so happy this evening to be there with Vidarbha Ophthalmic Society and Apollo Ophthalmic Society, both places which are very close to my heart. So we had a very nice lecture by Dr. Namrata and excellent proposition of the OPD guidelines by Dr. Santosh, which are so important. And Dr. Santosh in the article in the IGO has come up with excellent protocols and guidelines for which we are very thankful. And Dr. Namrata also has published and made available the guidelines and they are getting updated time to time. And let us look forward to these guidelines for our help and for all our routine activities. Suffice it to say that I'll take on the OT guidelines and in the COVID and the post-COVID scenario. The COVID has really created a crisis and something that this generation we have not seen. Maybe our previous generation also has not seen. However, there have been many catastrophes and crises that the previous generation did see. And if you ask your grandfather, maybe he'll say that, yes, I think the plague was a worse crisis than what it was, than what this is today. So the first and foremost that we need to be aware is first to no harm, primum non nocere. And that is how we have to deal with our patients in this scenario of COVID crisis. So the AIO's recommendations that all ophthalmologists need to provide urgent and emergent care only as of today is so important now and is going to be also important in the times to come, even when the lockdown has been lifted, because the lifting of the lockdown is going to be very gradual, and gradually we are going to get up on our feet and then start walking, running, and then ultimately, as we ophthalmologists have all done, flying is something that is a little distant as of today. So it is our duty as of now to provide intervention in the sight-threatening disorders, and the sight-threatening disorders in each subspecialty has been very, very well defined in the IGO article. Do look into it. And the emergency measures that we are providing to our patients now are the emergent care that we need to give at this point of time. But gradually, we are also looking forward to the day when the government offers the lift of the lockdown. The protection that we have to afford today is not only for our patients, but it is also for their attendants, it is also for our staff, and it is also for ourselves. And for this, we have to maintain a very, very good and a proper protocol so that everything is in order. So in the post-COVID era, and when gradually the elective procedures will have to be taken up, there are certain things that we must remember. And the first thing that we need to remember for the Operation Theatre protocol, and that which becomes very, very important initially, is the initial conversation or the pre-operative conversation that our counselors will have with our patients and their attendants over the telephone. The telephone is going to become a very, very important medium in which the teleophthalmology is also going to work, as well as the other ways in which we reach out to our patients by WhatsApp or by emails. So it is important that in this area, we have our counselors talk to our patients and prepare them for the operation theatre and the details of the surgeries that they are going to go through in the next day or the day after. So the preparation of the patient is important. The patient and the patient party have to be told that they should come prepared at that particular time, and they have to be punctual. They should be accompanied by one attendant, and that one attendant also needs to maintain certain protocols. The patient has to be told that when they come in with their attendant, they will be screened at the gate. And at the gate, there are a few things that would be taken for them, like the temperature would be taken, and they need to wear a mask when they come in. The questions that they have to be asked before they are prepared to come in is whether they have any upper respiratory tract infection, whether there is cough, cold, sneezing, temperature. And it is good practice to ask the patients to come in with a temperature recorded the previous day by their local physician. These are the things that definitely have to be taken up by the counselor who is talking to the patient over the telephone. And also, what is very important is the patient has to be provided, if possible, by the consent form, which they might be emailed, or by WhatsApp they should be posted, so that the patient and the patient party are prepared for all the different portions that we were not asking them to go through or sign before the COVID era. So the patient and the patient party need to know that these are the signatures and these things have to be signed on, and the paper should be with them. It is also good practice if they can come up with a print and a signed signature already, as well as the financial transaction, if it can be done in a paperless way, would be the best way in such a condition. So the situation is going to prevail for some months, and we have to remain vigilant of all these things. And these things are going to go on, and it is not just a lift of the COVID ban or the lockdown that is going to open the floodgates, but it has to be a very, very gradual process in which all these protocols will have to be in place. So now, which cases to be taken up for the operation theatre? Initially, all surgeries should be daycare surgeries, and these daycare surgeries should be attended to with that minimum amount of time. Emergency cases have to be given precedence over the elective cases. And the most difficult part for any ophthalmologist is to be to have a number of cases that is so limited by the standard that a surgeon would have been operating in the pre-COVID times. So if a surgeon has been operating for 20 surgeries, say 20 cataract surgeries, he will possibly have to take up just about 5 or 6 surgeries after the lift of the COVID ban. So the limitation of the surgery has to be important, and so also the time frame and the stagger of the patients for the surgery has to be done, so that the patient as well as the protocol can be maintained well. General anesthesia is one aspect that best be postponed by a month or two. There are certain surgeries like the DCR or the squint surgery, which can be postponed by a month or two. CAMP surgeries are important, but however, CAMP surgeries best be postponed unless the CAMP surgery is a surgery that demands immediate attention. And then also all the protocols of even the lower socioeconomic group have to be kept in mind, and the protocols have to be followed. The OT scheduling, as we just spoke, the preoperative counseling plays the most important role. And when the patient comes in, the patient is well prepared that the patient and the patient party have to abide by all the norms and the protocols. And the attendant also is aware that these are the aspects that have to be taken care of. The scheduling of the post-operative visits are also important, and the post-operative protocol, the post-operative discharge ticket, etc. Everything can be explained to the patient and the attendant over the WhatsApp or the email. And any discharge ticket best be made as paperless, in the paperless way, if the patient will be able to accept that. The consent form issued by the AIOS has to be duly signed and kept safely, and also the soft copy should be attached. The preoperative tests to be done. Now, this is an important part, and all routine tests which were performed earlier definitely have to be performed. Now, whether the PCR, the RT-PCR testing is important or not, is mandatory or not, that each state government will have to state, and that has to be because health is a state chapter, and that has to be followed as and where necessary. And most of the states are coming up with the protocol that all elective surgery patients will have to undergo the RT-PCR test, and they have to have that certificate with them when they are getting the surgery done. So it is important for a tie-up with the lab if possible, and that will increase the safety of both the staff and the patients alike. And the government protocol has to be followed, and the government protocol also will undergo changes from time to time. So what will be there in Maharashtra might not be there in West Bengal or in Delhi. So we need to look into what protocols are being laid out by the state government. The masks are mandatory for the patient and the attendant. However, the patient's mask definitely has to be changed once he's on his way to enter into the operation theater, and the norms of social distancing has to be followed by the staff and other patients in the waiting area. Now, in the operation theater, the operative protocols that have to which have undergone a change, of course, is the number of OT staff has to be minimum. And whatever minimum number can be worked with is very, very important at this point of time. The guidelines for the OT gowns and the protective wear for the surgeon and the OT staff is again something that is going to undergo changes. And we all need to remember that when our personnel or when the OT personnel come in, they have to come out of their street clothes, have the OT clothes on, and over the OT clothes will have to be the OT gowns, cap, mask. And if a patient is being, if a team of surgeons as well as OT personnel are treating a COVID patient or a possibly suspected COVID patient, then of course the protective gears, etc., are much more important, and PPE is something that is important in such conditions. Quick and safe surgery has to be performed, and here the seniors performing the surgery is very, very important. And therefore, what happens to our juniors, or what happens to our colleagues who are in training? So that is an important question being raised again and again. And of course, something that we must remember, that the juniors also have to get their share of surgeries, and the surgery expertise has to be imparted onto them. But however, this is not the time, and that time can wait, and anybody who is in a residency can go on to an extended residency program, and most of the institutions are providing so. The universal precautions are as usual, and the precautions in the OT. Topical anesthesia is definitely to be prepared over the local anesthesia. Many of us have been used to have two operating tables in the theater, in one theater. Now, they definitely here the protocol should change, and only one patient in one theater should be attended to. The protocol-based disinfection of the OT to be done after each surgical procedure. And this again has undergone a lot of change, because the changing of the equipment as much as possible, the total equipment if possible, in a cataract surgery, in a phaco surgery, the tip, the sleeves definitely have to change. The handpiece also best be changed. The tubings can be kept again after a Basilol swipe, but rest of the things definitely need to change. And also disinfecting the whole OT after every patient is important. Positive ventilation needs to be stopped in the theater during the procedure and for at least 20 minutes after the patient has left the theater. And this, of course, is important, because the patient has to have a change, and some time has to be allotted to this. Smoke evacuation after diathermy is important. Aerosol generating procedures such as intubation, extubation, bag masking, electrocautery should be done by the anesthetist and the surgeon while wearing full PPE. The HCQS prophylaxis, Dr. Namrata has already spoken about, and this is what ICMR has advised. However, it is also very important to remember that the HCQS can have a permanent damage on the macula, and this is possible. So keeping that in mind, we need to think about HCQS prophylaxis. Suspect or confirmed cases scheduled for surgery, it has to be referred to a hospital with ICU facilities and proper facilities where the COVID patients can be managed. Masks are mandatory for patients to undergo any major or minor procedure. The OT sepsis, of course, the rigorous OT protocols and microbiological surveillance is very, very important. Now, OTs that have HEPA filter and AHU sorry, and laminar airflow. This is very important, that the temperature to be maintained between 18 degrees and 24 degrees Celsius, and humidity between 50 and 55%. And regular OT disinfect is important. Flash autoclaves are definitely possible. Now, a thought about the HEPA filter and the AHU, a positive flow is important, and but it has to be at least greater than 25 cycles an hour, and therefore, so that the fresh air is all the time there and there's no recirculation of the internal air, which is very, very important as the protocol is. Now, every OT does not have an AHU, and especially our colleagues in the rural areas where they are practicing. A split split AC is possibly what most of us have in rural areas, and semi-urban areas, also in urban areas. So what about them? At one time, we thought that because of the risk of endophthalmitis, the split AC would not be the right flow the right equipment to use, but now it has become the right equipment. And an OT which has a split AC can definitely be used in such circumstances. So there are a lot of questions that definitely need answering, and I would be very happy to answer them. Extraordinary times, of course, call for extraordinary measures. And if you care to look at this picture that has been taken from one of the 17th century pictures, and in this 17th century picture, it is a picture of the bubonic plague of the 17th century. And this person with a mask has actually donned a PPE, and this is the artist's depiction of a PPE at that point of time in the 17th century plague, where the doctors and the healthcare officials had donned masks which resemble this. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Sir has given a very lucid and detailed talk, informative talk on the operation theatre protocol during and after COVID pandemic. I would like to request Dr. Viral Shah, Rajesh Joshi, and Dr. Thora to continue the further question.
Which antibiotic you prefer for conjunctivitis? Dr. Agrawal is wanting to ask.
What is classically recommended fluoroquinolones? So it could be a ciprofloxacin or it could be moxifloxacin eye drops 4 times a day, along with lubricant, which could be a CMC.
And what is the frequency of conjunctivitis at RP center you are encountering?
We did, and a lot of other people also said that during this period they've started seeing a lot of conjunctivitis. So again, all the people that we are seeing in conjunctivitis and RP center, we are actually keeping a record of all of them and have collected samples. But we, as of now, don't know whether they are COVID positive or not. But having said this, we do see about 2 or 3 patients a day of conjunctivitis, which we treat on the line of allergic conjunctivitis or with topical lubricants as well as one topical antibiotic.
Should fundus examination be done, and what is the way to go?
It has to be done, and either 78 or 90 on a slit lamp or indirect. Definitely not direct.
And sir, do you recommend cleaning of trial frames and trial glasses?
Yeah, trial frame can be cleaned with 1% sodium hypochlorite. Trial lenses can be rinsed with water and dried.
And what about corneal foreign bodies, sir? Removal of corneal foreign bodies?
Well, of course, it has to be done. There is no option. And it is absolutely no touch. You just use a sterile hypodermic needle and remove it, right? So there is no contraindication.
How do you go about acute dacryocystitis?
Yeah.
How do you go about acute dacryocystitis?
Well, acute dacryocystitis, you can give antibiotics. Obviously, you're not going to do anything major unless it's a lacrimal abscess. You have to drain it. And if you want to do any lacrimal procedure, you have to take adequate precautions. It is not advisable to get into the patient's nasal cavity mainly, but if you want to do an external.
Yeah, for Partha sir, is it mandatory to do COVID testing and X-ray chest?
Yeah, so this is a very important question, and I think we need to answer this very well. So as of now, the RT-PCR is, as I said, has been instituted in certain states and have to undergo a RT-PCR before going into an elective surgery. So this is there in certain states, and what our state desires of us, and then go on to it. However,
I also, when we were discussing before our discussion at RP Center, we are planning to start the elective surgeries and the OPDs in the next 7 to 10 days. And for all the patients who are going to be undergoing surgery, we are going to do a COVID test.
X-ray test? What about X-ray test?
Yeah, I'll just come to that.
These 2 things we are planning to do for all the patients who will be undergoing surgery.
Cases where the RT-PCR has not been instituted, however, certain other tests definitely need to be done, and such as TCDC, ESR, chest X-ray, which is mandatory, definitely need to come into the protocol, and these things have to be done to rule out whether the patient has any possibility of having COVID positive, at least a carrier also.
Sir, any preference on FECO versus SICS as an aerosol generating procedure?
Yes, here, of course, the SICS surgeons are going to rule, and they definitely are going to have 1 point over us FECO surgeons and say that yes, the SICS definitely has a lesser possibility of liberating aerosol. So it is a procedure, however, this possibility is definitely mitigated because the liberation of the aerosol will be within the eye unless the tip comes out and you're still pressing on the foot pedal and actually liberating the aerosols in the air. So it is something that you have to be careful about, and you definitely can go ahead with the phacoemulsification.
I think in the countries where they have started doing elective surgeries, they are all doing phacoemulsification. And like Dr. Partha said, the aerosol generation is intraocular. It's not actually extraocular. That is the plea that they give. Another thing is you have to be careful. You have to be changing your switch between the cases. Your needles, which earlier maybe after 3 or 4 cases you were doing it. And again, there is a controversial role on cassette because sometimes you can have a backflow of the fluid. So of course, it's a very expensive proposition that you change cassette after every phaco case, but that is what is proposed, that you should be changing all these things after every phaco case. There's a question there whether we can do cataract surgeries electively or not.
Yeah.
All those cases like Santosh said, phakomorphic glaucoma, hypermature cataracts, or cases which are emergencies can definitely be done. And like I said, we are going to be starting our elective surgery within the next week, and our elective OPDs as well. Our load we have planned in such a manner that we are now for the first week only planning for 25% of the load, because the social distancing has to be there, the time limits have to increase. And I'm sure when we do it, we'll come out with more, we would know what problems are and we would be able to guide people better. And that may instill more confidence into surgeons who have not yet started their surgeries or who are into solo practice.
There is no tier transmission as of yet. I mean, there is no recorded or documented case of
sequencing of the OT patients, and the number of hours of OT time can go up, and you can actually have maybe 2 sets of people in place, so that the stretch of the OT hours is there, similar as what Santosh would also agree. The OPD hours also could be stretched, and 2 teams working in sequence can take care of a larger number of patients.
So our OPD cabins are a little close to each other, so we are doing it in alternate OPD cabin in the OPD. In the OR also, in 2 of the ORs we have 2 tables simultaneously, so that is again something which is not advocated even otherwise. Of course, the AC will continue to function. That cannot be helped, and it is a centrally air conditioned thing. We're just trying to see how that positive pressure ventilation can be. We are working out with our AC engineers to see how that can be, with the exhaust, that air can be recirculated outside and does not go again into the system, because OT is the area where there is, especially if it's this kind of a OT where there can be maximum infection with the aerosol. So our engineers have today only in the morning we had a meeting, and they have sorted out a way to get the air out, and we are just trying that, and if we succeed, we'll definitely let you know how it is going to work out. About peers, you said that there is no clear-cut evidence, and that is why, in fact, there was we are getting a lot of COVID, money for research into COVID, because it's such a difficult situation. And so we applied for this research grant, and within 2 days it got approved, and also ethics approved. And I'm sure the cohort which we have, which is of COVID patients, we would know whether they are actually there or not, so that at least that scare will go away, from our minds. Even if
Namrata, virus has been detected, but in minuscule quantities.
Yeah.
The load of infection is not enough to cause human infection. That is one. Second is all this that we are talking is mostly overreaction at this point in time because of the fear of the unknown. Once we start knowing the disease, I think most of this will die down. Most important is physical distancing in the OPD and OT. OT, we are not worried about getting COVID infection just by we are doing a fecal vaccination. It is that patient may be an asymptomatic case and then operating on that might cause cross infection. But if the patient is protected with a PPE, if you are also protected with a PPE, then there is nothing to worry. We have operated HIV patients routinely and we are safe and sound so far.
Yeah, it is something like HIV. We already formulated guidelines for that. So it is something like that. COVID is
Universal precautions for everyone because we know that this disease is asymptomatic. And most important, as WHO has rightly said, 60 to 70% of population has to be infected before this disease is going to die down. In the sense that it is not going to be a pandemic, it is going to be a endemic with exacerbation. So if that is the situation, then most of our own family members and patients are going to have this infection at some point in time in the next 1 year.
It's quite possible that we are going to the hospital every day. We are actually asymptomatic carriers for our family members at home. So it's quite a possibility. Sometimes I feel I've already had COVID, you know, and because of URI that I had, or I feel I'm already done with it. So it's like that. But even if we prove that in tears there is no, through RT-PCR, that there's no virus, at least that fear will be gone. Even if it is a negative study, it doesn't matter. I mean, at least it will tell us that, you know, you don't have to be fearful about it. I think as of now, it is more about fear, and it is more about bringing back the confidence in our all practitioners, ophthalmologists, in small, medium clinics, that, you know, they shouldn't fear it. That is the only thing.
Absolutely, they should never fear it.
So I think that is what we talked about lockdown.
Purpose of research.
Yeah, that is the purpose of research, and that is also the reason why at AIIMS we thought we will be the first ones to start off our, you know, elective surgeries and elective OPD, because probably we can take that kind of a chance there.
It's a mother institute.
Can Dr. Namrata, can I say hello?
Yeah.
Hello. Dr. Namrata, this is Dr. Agnihotri here.
Yes, sir. Yes, I can see.
Just wanted to add one more thing, because all these patients who are asymptomatic, they have silent hypoxia. So what in our setup we have done is we have added pulse oximeter into the outdoor. Every patient, after cleaning his hands, undergoes pulse oximetry, and if his count is less than 90, I think this patient has to be screened separately, because silent hypoxia is a salient feature of this particular disease. He might be asymptomatic, but his lung functions go down. So I think, can you highlight on this? The pulse oximeter is a very simple device to be put into your OPD.
Yeah, it is a simple device. Everybody has it. So this is something which may be useful, but we've not used it. So we
are doing it in all our emergency patients. We are doing it.
So I think this is something which could be certainly looked at. When we'll start this thing, we'll certainly look at this.
Yeah, because these patients are silently hypoxic. They do not show any symptoms of hypoxia, but if you do their pulse oximetry, it is usually less than 80. And probably we can really screen more of them, because lots of these asymptomatic patients are going to move around our clinics.
That takes care of most of the questions. I request Karandikar sir to please sum up and give a vote of thanks on behalf of Wizard Ophthalmic Society.
Thank you the faculty. Excellent presentations from all the 3 faculty members. We have learned quite a lot, and we are hopeful that the research that is being done at our mother institute will be of benefit to the nation and also to the international people. Not only that, whatever, it is also understood that this is a dynamic thing. Whatever rules are applicable at present, whatever guidelines are applicable at present, will go on changing as per our needs. And we will learn much more in the days to come. The research will help us to have fear, to continue with the fear, or not to have fear at all in the days to come from this COVID-19. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all the people who have participated in this particular seminar. Thank you the organizers for giving me this opportunity to chair the session. Namaste everybody.